Today I want to share the process behind my first six-figure budget directing job. Hi people of the internet, my name's Scott, a director and sometimes cinematographer based in London, England. This job was a 60-second spot for premium pet food. That horrible but true saying, it's not what you know, but who you know, comes into play here. Half a year before the job we're looking at today, I'd been asked to shoot a wedding video as a favour for an old fan of my old band in my previous life as a long-haired rock star. And the fan, at this point, works high up in management at an agency based in London. So I said, yes, I'll shoot a wedding video for a few £100, and if you could introduce me to someone new in production that your agency works with. She email intros me to someone at Trailer Park, a production arm that works with her agency. This person at Trailer Park then email intros me to one of their in-house producers, Rob Wildsmith, a guy who I was really good friends with for a large portion of my childhood. Great. But to be fair, last time I heard from Rob, it was early days of him working on reception at a production company. Now it seemed like he was semi-running the show at this place. He agreed to meet me for lunch and a catch-up. At said lunch, he was kind of distracted with some job he was working on. He seemed somewhat disinterested to see me, but it was nice to catch up and he gave me the usual,
I checked out your website. You've got some nice stuff. I'll definitely bear you in mind for the future.
I've heard that many times before in my life, so I assumed it'd be unlikely that I'd actually hear from Rob again. But then, several months later, out of the blue, I got a call from him. They've got a brief in for Purina, the fancy pet food arm of Nestle.
And basically it's just a bunch of match cuts. I remember that piece on your website, and that's exactly what they want to do.
The piece on my website that he was referring to was your cliché travel video I'd shot on holiday in Malta with my girlfriend at the time, which happened to include a bunch of match cuts. It wasn't high-end by any means, but it was enough to stick in Rob's mind, and like so many times in this industry, the agency wanted to see the thing they were trying to do executed already, so they know you can do it. Madness. But this is how I was shortlisted for the job and how I ultimately won it. Big thanks to Anna for suggesting I start shooting things for fun and not just work at a time that I was questioning my love for it all. Otherwise, I would never have taken the camera on holiday with us in the first place. Side note, if you haven't already, you should definitely watch the video I made on passion projects after you finish watching this one. I'll leave a link in the description as well as one up there in case you want to open tab later. So I'd kind of been given the 90% this is likely to happen thumbs up before I'd even treated on the thing. I think they were up against it time-wise, and although the project was the first one I was directing that crossed into the six figures in terms of budget, there'd been a lot of development time eating into that budget, as well as the shoot taking place abroad, which was going to drastically eat into it. So I don't think many more experienced and expensive directors would have been within their budget. Rob had mentioned that there was someone else that was up for it, but they didn't have a piece of work as relevant as mine, so things were looking good. I was asked for a treatment though. I wrote a bit of fluff to intro, talked about the technique of match frames and split screen that we'd be using, shared a bunch of images of the location, then I basically repeated their script and idea back to them, including storyboards the production company had already had commissioned before I was brought on board. Some more fluff about look, feel and tone, some really basic reference imagery. I talked about music, sound design, and then left it with an honestly quite weak summary to sign off, but it was enough. After a couple of preliminary meetings and this had all been signed off, I headed out to Hungary with Rob 2 weeks before the shoot to Recce, or Location Scout if you're American. As the farm was several hours drive from Budapest where we were flying into, we'd travelled the day before and had a few hours in the evening after landing where Rob and I took full advantage of being in the city, visiting one of their famous baths and getting drinks on the river. The sort of perks that do from time to time come up on jobs like these, but it's definitely less common on non-travel jobs. The next morning we travelled early with a local fixer and driver to the farm that we were going to be shooting on. We met the farmers, toured the farm extensively, taking reference images as we went, getting Rob to stand in for the talent. We'd recce'd a potential lunch spot whilst we were there too, whilst having calls with two prospective DOPs that were both available and affordable for the following week. Both of them recommended by Rob, who'd worked with them before. I chose my favourite of the two based off their previous work, the talented Jordan Buck, and his agent was given the thumbs up. Back in England, we had another meeting, with production, agency and client, sharing our updated storyboards with some of the reference images I'd taken of prospective spots on the recce. One thing that you should probably know for context is the client had been insistent that we worked with the actual farmer and the actual representative for the company. We weren't allowed to do any casting or bring in any actors that might be more comfortable in front of a camera. We were heading out to the Hungarian countryside for a total of 5 days, including travel time. 1 day prep with the DOP and our main on-screen talent, 2 days to shoot, and we might have even been able to grab some pickups if needed on the morning of the day we were leaving. We also had to be semi-flexible with when we were actually there. Flights weren't booked until the very last minute, as some of the shots that involved combine harvesters doing their thing and harvesting could only take place when the farmer gave the say-so that the conditions were right. 2 days to shoot might seem a lot for a 60-second spot, but the farm was enormous and there was lots of time to be spent travelling between locations. Our crew wasn't huge and we were working with inexperienced, non-native English-speaking talent. Crew-wise, the role of producer was taken over by a normally executive producer who had joined the company just that week, as Rob was on holiday for the actual shoot. Then there was myself, the director, a DOP, first AC, a local fixer, driver, and 2 local sparks with a small lighting and grip package, and a stills photographer. Oh yeah, then no less than 7 agency personnel, eating heavily into the budget by just being there, as they all had to be flown out there, taxied, accommodated, and fed for the week. It's quite common for there to be unnecessary agency bodies on set. On this job in particular, only one of them commented on any of the shots the whole time we were there. I think it was probably just an excuse for an all expenses paid week out of the office for most of them, but fair enough, because I'd definitely do the same if I was in their position. And lastly, one client, who very kindly said to me on the first day as I shook his hand,
"Don't f this up. We put a lot of trust in you."
Thanks for the words of encouragement, buddy. It was, as far as most shoots go, fairly straightforward. It was all straight lines, and we just had to capture what was on the storyboards. Timings were important, as was the pace of the walk and precision of where it was in relation to the camera so the match frames would cut nicely. So we measured the distance exactly for the route he should walk from the camera on each take. I also had a metronome on hand to dictate the pace of the walk. There were eye lines to take into account for these shots, whip directions to get right, and of course the performances, which you might think would be pretty simple, but they weren't. This scene in the barn definitely took the most time to get right. I remember very clearly the exec producer saying to me to just make a decision at this point. At the time, I was definitely trying to people-please client and agency. I now know to be stronger in my convictions and stand up for more of my own opinion. Because at the end of the day, that's why they hire you, for your taste, your opinions, and your ideas. These were dreamy scheduled days with no shortcuts, a solid hour for lunch, and perfect weather throughout. Perhaps I'm viewing it through rose-tinted glasses now, as it was 5 years ago, but I think it went pretty well. Back in London, the edit came together fairly easily as timings were so precise and we had ticked off all of the storyboards. I did a temp voiceover for us to work to, and the biggest debate was around the music. I think we ended up going with the initial song I found off of Audio Network after having swapped in and out various tracks and played with tempos. The feedback process was far more old school to that of which I'm used to now post-COVID. Multiple meetings sat in an edit suite with all agency in attendance, much discussion and debate, asking to see other takes of X. Ultimately sticking with what we had in the first place because obviously we used the best take. Why wouldn't you choose the best take? Then once picture was locked, it went off to the mill to be graded. The agency said that they were super happy, and so was the client. They talked about other projects that they wanted to get me involved with, but never did. And lastly, you might be wondering about my pay, as that's something that I sometimes talk about when I'm allowed to. Out of the approximately £110,000 budget, I was paid a total of £6,000 in the end. What was probably what ended up being a total of 10 days of my time. Now that was a staggering payday for me at the time of doing this job, one that I would be a lot less happy with now. Unless, of course, it was a showreel-worthy piece. Because if it's a showreel-worthy piece, then all money concerns are out the window. I hope you enjoyed a look into the process behind this dog food ad that only actually features one dog, who only actually made it into the ad because he wandered out of the field near where we were filming and ended up being adopted by one of the agency members. Aww. If you're a living legend, give the video a thumbs up. It really helps the guy out. Check out more videos about the process behind a ton of other shoots here. And if you still haven't, make sure to subscribe for more semi-helpful tips and interesting insider industry knowledge.